mid-1990s, I was working the second patrol shift, 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. It had been a slow night, which was the norm in this town. I had finished doing my nightly checks, going door to door in town, checking locks and handles and windows and alleyways. The thrift store sat silent and calm with their antiques and quilts perfectly in place. The barbershop was empty and quiet, with just a candy-striped glass lighting the doorway. The gas station was barely lit. It was calm and clear of activity. Everything in our town was asleep. It was closing in on midnight. It was the last round I would make before taking a break and parking so I could finish filling out my paperwork for the evening. That had been my nightly routine for some time now, and I had no reason to suspect anything would be different. I drove around the town for a moment and then parked by the Masonic Lodge and the church. It was a quiet corner, as every corner was at night in that town. It was just a touch after midnight when I felt the impact. I just knew some drunk a-hole had violated the peace of this quiet place and T-boned my beautiful patrol car. My pen and paperwork lay strewn all over the inside of the car. Everything was scattered. I looked up in the rearview mirror, ready to see the carnage, but I couldn't make out the headlights, and that is what I could not comprehend. I unbuckled and looked out the window to make sure it was safe to exit the vehicle. I didn't see anything. The rear end of my car was knocked 4 feet from the curb and into the middle of the road. I got out and I thought about radioing for EMS, but I wanted to assess the driver of the other vehicle first. What I will never forget, the silence was deafening and there was no other car. There was no driver, no accident. There was nothing. I looked at my patrol car. There was no damage, not a single scratch or dent, not a dust cloud, no tire marks, absolutely nothing. No wonder I didn't see it coming. I didn't even know what it was. I walked around my patrol car and stepped back in complete shock. Sure enough, my car had been shifted almost 4 feet horizontally and several feet forward. I just stood there. I couldn't move. I couldn't radio it in. There was nothing to report. Somehow, someway, something had violently slammed into my car and moved it in a way that was utterly impossible. It's a night I will not forget, and I have been very forthcoming about it. I have nothing to hide, and in all my years as an officer, this is the strangest and craziest experience I ever had. If anyone asks me about it, I tell them exactly what happened, and I recall every detail as if it were yesterday. I don't know if it was the town, the intersection, or if my patrol car and I had been bothering something by sitting there, but whatever it was, it sure showed me that night that I didn't need to park there again, and I remembered that. It honestly felt like someone had picked up my cruiser and slung it straight into the middle of the street. I'll never be able to explain it. One of my coworkers has his own story, and it's crazier than mine. 2 officers were working one night in town, one younger and the other more seasoned. This would have been around the late 1990s on a weekend, since there was more than one officer on patrol. Both officers were at the police station in the center of town, reviewing the day's calls and completing last-minute paperwork. It was just a bit before midnight when a stereotypical hippie-looking van pulled up in front of the station. Both officers could see the van clearly through the front window, and they watched in amazement as a young couple exited, looking as if they had stepped out of a 1960s film. They were dressed in perfect vintage attire, right down to the tie-down peace signs and the fringe and the bell-bottoms. The 2 officers looked at each other in confusion at the sight of everything. The first officer opened the door for the young couple and welcomed them inside. He and the other officer asked if they were okay, and the couple explained that they were lost and trying to find an address in the next town over. These officers said that the couple spoke just as if they were from that time period as well. They thought that maybe they were on their way to a 70s themed event of some sort, and they were taking the roles pretty seriously. The officer decided to draw a crude map for the couple to follow so that they could find their way. The couple smiled the whole time and were pleasant as could be, and then they thanked the officers and headed out the door. As they left, the younger officer noticed that they had forgotten the paper with the directions. He quickly snatched it up and grabbed the door before it was even halfway closed behind the couple, and he reached out to hand it to them. But there at the door, he froze, and his jaw dropped. The older officer said that he saw his face literally turn white. His mouth gaped open in awe. He rushed over to see what was wrong and saw that the van and the couple had vanished. He looked at his partner and asked where they were. The young officer replied shakily in a whisper, "I think we just saw a ghost." The older officer looked at him confused. He was unable to understand. "What do you mean? Where did they go?" he said. It slowly dawned on the older officer that his colleague was right. There was no possible way that the couple could have walked the 20 feet to the van, started it up, and driven off in the 2 seconds that it took for the young officer to snatch the paper up and hand it out to them. The door hadn't even finished closing behind them by the time he made it there with the directions. Both officers felt a chill run up their spines, and they just stood there dumbfounded. They looked all around and even ran up to the area where the van had been parked. Dew had just begun to settle on the pavement and the surrounding grass, but there was no evidence of any vehicle having been parked there. Nothing had been disturbed. There were no tire prints, no footprints, not even one lonely drop of condensation from a tailpipe or anything. Both officers admit that it was the strangest and most unexplainable thing they had ever witnessed, and it is etched into their brains and mine to this day. The younger officer stated, "I still wonder to this day if they made it to their destination." I have heard you mention that people accuse you of writing all these stories. Yes, they do. I would like these people to consider that it has taken me days to write this one. I had to sit down and to think about every little aspect, remember every word and every event, not to mention that when I discuss my own experiences, it takes a toll on me, and I have to relive those moments all over again. And to have some stranger accuse my story of being made up is discrediting and disrespectful to me and those of us brave enough to share what we went through. Now, I share these memories with you because I have been listening to you for some time now, and I trust you more than anyone to tell my true stories, as I've held them inside for far too long. I need more than anything to share them with someone, and I'm thankful that it is you and your community. My wife's cousin now follows you as well, and we love you, Cam, and we thank you for allowing us to share these memories with you. Thank you for taking the time to read them. You help more than you will ever know. I will write more about our little community as soon as I am able, and I'll tell you about a 10-foot caped figure that haunts the town, and it slinks from tree to tree. God bless you. Oh, thank you to the writer for that. Yes, that's true. I've been accused that I write all these stories, and I've written a couple, but not, good grief. I've done thousands of stories on here, and you're right. Writing takes a long time. I mean, there's no way. I don't think there's any way one person could write enough to keep enough content going at least as much as I do. It would be more than a full-time job to write all these. But these ghost stories that he just described are, it's like a Halloween story. And we're getting close to Halloween. Today is October 11. So I appreciate the writer for sending this. It was wonderful. It was titled Police Officer Ghost Stories, and it was just perfect for this channel. And it's old. I've had it for a long time, and I'm just now getting to it. So thank you very much for sending it. Here is a story from a previous podcast several years ago that some of you may not have heard. Hope you enjoy it. When I was young, I had a close group of friends. We were an eclectic group of guys who first met early on in high school. Our group consisted of Dungeons and Dragons nerds, jocks, martial artists, rich kids, poor kids, and some with troubled backgrounds. Despite our many differences, we managed to bond and remain close, partially because we understood the other's personal traumas, but also because we shared some pretty strange experiences together. A favorite pastime was to get together late at night, play a game that we called TESO, Tactical Environmental Scouting Operations. What teenage boy wants to admit to playing hide and seek? We would play TESO in graveyards or parks, but we weren't above playing it through a random neighborhood either. Vermont in the 1980s was a good place to grow up. We felt safe there, and wherever we went, we were kings of our domain. As far as we were concerned, we owned the whole state, and it was our personal playground. A couple of us had driver's license, so it was nothing for us to leave our city and drive 30 minutes into the country to find the perfect woods for our nighttime operations. One thing about Vermont is there is always plenty of snow. And one cold winter night, we headed out to a spot on the lake near Shelburne. Apparently, we thought it would be fun to up the cold factor by adding the freezing winds off the lake to make our game more challenging. We drove down the road leading to the beach under a bright moon and we parked. The large sheets of ice were fascinating to watch as they swayed in the turbulent water, and the sounds of the waves slapping across the ice chunks intermingled with the occasional popping and crashing sounds as they slammed against each other. We were so enthralled with the sight that we were oblivious to the unnatural quiet around us. We didn't exactly have permission to be where we were, but as kings of all we surveyed, we didn't care. We were near barns where horses were kept on the property, and in our youth it didn't occur to us that we should have been hearing the normal animal sounds that should have come from that barn or from the fenced-in pasture behind us. We assessed our playing field. We were on the beach. Calling it a beach might have been a bit optimistic, but there was no more than 15 feet of it before it dropped into the icy water. Between the beach and the pasture was a small playground outfitted with swings, slides, and a jungle gym. An erosion wall stretched the distance from the playground to the beach. Once our boundaries were set, we made sure no one else was around, and we began our game of TESO. This night was special in that we had brought along some special guests to play the game with us. One of the guys was trying to get friendly with a girl from school, and we invited her and a couple of her friends to come so we could introduce them to our strange nightly activities. As girls, they were enchanted and expressed their joy with giggles and whispers. And as boys, we decided we'd give them a good scare halfway through our game. At the designated moment, one of the guys pointed to the edge of the woods near a horse pen and said, "Did you hear that?" And as if on cue, a cracking sound came from the beach. It was only the ice, but it added to the sudden change of emotions from play to an eerie silence. Everyone stopped to stare at the tree line. The boys knew it was a joke, but the girls were looking uneasy. They each took an unconscious step to close in their ranks, and then a long piercing shriek of a howl came from that exact point in the woods where my friend had pointed, and now we were all looking. I had never heard a wolf's howl before, but I knew that wasn't what it was. It sounded a lot bigger, half animal, maybe half female scream. Now it was the boys' turn to step closer together. We took a mental note of everyone present. We were all there, but none of us was hiding in the woods making that awful cry. Surely no one in their right mind would be out in the woods after midnight in weather that cold just to play a prank on a bunch of teenagers. We wouldn't have been there if not for the fact that we were afraid we'd miss the opportunity to frighten these girls. 30 seconds later came a second howl. It was even more evil sounding than the first, and it broke our stupor. Panic ensued. The girls were crying. We so-called kings were panicking and screaming too, just like them. Someone yelled for everyone to run to the cars. And all at once we were in motion, each of us overwhelmed by terror and feeling that the second howl was meant to be a dinner bell ringing. All 8 of us, 5 boys and 3 girls, piled into the 2 vehicles and slammed the door shut, and we locked them. And then everything went quiet. Were we all holding our breath? I don't remember. After a minute or 2, we began to relax. False security, fueled by window glass and sheet metal, enhanced our bravery. I felt my shoulders relax for a second before one of the girls laser locked on the woods and pointed her finger and screamed. We instantly turned to see what she was pointing at and found ourselves staring into a pair of red glowing eyes from just inside the tree line. And then a third howl rattled the windows. Seconds before, a black blur shot out of the edge of my line of sight. Then the car was shaking as if something were rocking it side to side. It felt like it was almost lifting the car off the ground. We all yelled and shrieked with the realization that mere sheet metal was no protection against our impending doom. We scrambled around trying to see what was shaking us to death, and it should have been easy to make out features, a shape, anything. But all we saw was a black blur outlined by the white light of the moon. And then the vehicle rocked to a stop as the same black blur raced toward the beach and out of sight. A minute passed, and then 2. And finally, someone rolled down the window and shouted over to the other car, "Did you guys see anything?" "We saw your car shaking," someone replied. "Yeah, but did you see it?" And after a pause, they answered, "No, we didn't see anything." We sat there for another 10 minutes shouting back and forth between the vehicles. I can't honestly say why we didn't immediately leave. Maybe we were too frightened to move. Eventually, our nerves settled and bravado won out over common sense. Oh, to be a teenager again, showing off for the ladies. Simultaneously, we opened our car doors and we all got out. We were clearly still shaken and doing our best to hide it. Everyone was talking at once and asking questions and offering opinions. "What was that?" "I don't know." "What did it look like? I couldn't see it." "What was it like being in the car as it was being shaken?" "Well, hell, it terrified me." "Where do you think it went?" I started to pull away from the group. I was sure I'd seen something ahead toward the beach. I walked through the crunching snow. The ground was covered in our footprints from earlier. And that's when I saw it. It was in the middle of a patch of clean, untouched snow, and it was a very large paw print. It was a single padded print with claw marks extending from them, isolated and ice-covered white, and it was huge. It was easily 8 inches wide, and I called everyone over to check it out, and in shock, we murmured to each other about what could have made that track. And then one of the guys yelled, "Hey, over there!" And sure enough, there was another print 8 feet away. Whatever it was, it must have been enormous, and it was running on 2 feet. We found 5 tracks in all, and their distance apart and sizing reinforced the fact that some huge thing had run toward the beach. We scoured the entire area looking for more prints, but it was like it dissolved into nothingness. We searched both left and right. It never turned, but where could it have gone? I walked down to the beach area, and there was a break in the wall and had ice-covered stairs leading down to it. I more fell down the steps than I walked down them, and the wind had stopped. The resulting lack of sound from the water increased the eeriness. Now I could hear the crunching of my own feet pushing through the top layer of snow. Then I found what I was looking for: more tracks. The first one was 15 feet from the wall, and I yelled to everyone to come down. There was a moment of comic relief as I watched them slide and fall down the icy steps. There they were, and there we were, huddled around the first of the prints that led into the edges of the freezing lake water. We determined that the last step above the wall was 15 feet from it, and the first step below was another 15 feet. A 30-foot jump. A 3.5-foot tall wooden railing ran along the top of that wall that it also had to maneuver over, and it sailed over that rail and dropped a minimum of 20 feet to the beach below. It was time for us to leave. We went back the next day. The prints were still there, confirming that we had indeed witnessed something strange. And over the years, we've joked about our run-in with a werewolf. The term dogman hadn't entered the lexicon yet. Later, we found a plaque posted to a tree at the far end of the beach. It stated that the land there was once the site of an Indian massacre or something worse. It's been so long that I no longer remember the story written on it. But over the years, we went back to the beach many times, and it sort of became our spot, a place to hang out and chill. It was left unspoken that we were there to see if we would ever encounter this thing again, and luckily, we never did. I wonder now if we somehow summoned that thing there that night. I'm now a well-armed child of God, ready to speak with the authority of Jesus against any such encounters. Be watchful, be vigilant, and most of all, be ready.